safe banking or banking for cannabis, in my opinion, is one of the most discussed issues. So what is the state of cannabis banking and financing in both Canada and US, and what type of banking reforms are on the horizon? I'm going to start with Josh on this one.
All right, so a lot of you are going to get bored by this, but everybody's talking about the Safe Banking Act and down in the United States, and most people don't realize how that affects us up here in Canada, but it does greatly. The way that money moves around the world through SWIFT and through transfer payments, a lot of it goes through the United States, and because it goes through the United States, Canadian banks are not prepared to put the risk that they have to take of transferring this money around. That is why you have such a hard time opening a bank account. That is why you have such a hard time getting a line of credit, and that's why you have such a hard time transferring money around. I don't believe the Safe Banking Act is going to pass in the near future. I do not believe that this is going to get better for us. I think that the Canadian banks are going to finally have to just kind of bite the bullet and start to move ahead, but that is the main reason. So with the Safe Banking Act being in limbo, I've heard rumors of it being 3 or 4 votes short of passing, but until that passes so that money can move freely through the United States, it is going to clog the rest of the world. I've heard of accounts in the UK being closed because they're cannabis based, and that is again because the money transfers through the United States before it comes back to that customer or back to the company. So that's kind of the state for us on banking. Anybody that's listening that's an LP that's opening a bank account, I would encourage you to open multiple accounts at multiple banks if you can, and I would encourage you to open sub-accounts just in case so that you have backup all the way along.
Maybe I'll just jump in and agree with you, Josh. It's definitely complicated, and it's very much connected, financial services around the world. From Merrco's standpoint, when we founded the company and started to grow our business, we were very involved with our merchant customers to help them find banking, because they need a bank account to settle their deposits into once we process transactions. And we've certainly seen a lot of customers that have lost their banking, to your point about having multiple accounts just in case, to sort of mitigate the risk of that. And there were some institutions that have been willing to bank cannabis in Canada and then have changed their minds, or they have a lot of rigor around the compliance aspects and make it super challenging and expensive for either a retailer or a licensed producer or manufacturer, anyone who's really in the cannabis space. Even for ourselves to get our own banking back in 2017, 2018 was challenging, and we're a payments company supporting this sector. But it just goes to show you how complicated it is. I would say anyone out there who's in need of Canadian bank accounts or US bank accounts, we have an excellent network, and we'd be delighted to help if we can.
Could you imagine if you were in any other industry and you didn't have a bank account, couldn't get a bank account? Like, the things that this industry has to persevere from is incredible. So obviously many cannabis companies in the US have to deal in cash. So how big is the challenge to audit cannabis businesses that are forced to deal in cash? And what are other issues you see in audits for the industry? And I'll start with Larry on this one.
Thanks, Brianna. So there are a ton of unique issues to the cannabis space in auditing. Cash is one of them, but the biggest issue really is a lack of internal controls and adequate documentation. These issues can be overcome if there's adequate documentation, if there's adequate internal control. Some of the other issues that we have to deal with in the audit space are often companies coming to us who have never had an audit in the past. They've been cultivating, or they've had inventory for years. And they want to go public, for example, and they need 2 or 3 years of audited financials, and they've never had an audit. And rolling back inventory, auditing and historical information going back years is a challenge, and it's that much more of a challenge if there's a lack of adequate documentation and internal control. As well, there often are issues around governance in the space, and in summary, I think the key issue is plan ahead. You know, if you're planning on taking your company public, if you're going to need an audit, think about it in advance, talk to your advisors, and make sure that you don't find yourself in a situation where you have investment bankers who are interested in taking you public and raising you money, and the audit is an impediment. If you can plan in advance, then you can prevent that from becoming an issue. And usually planning in advance means, planning in advance is hopefully about 2 years.
Hey, I'd like to add something to that too. Stop doing handshake deals. You're a legal business, start operating like one, and make sure you've got contracts, spend the time, get the signatures. Don't do any more handshake deals, because once you grow from where you are to where you want to be, where you're getting audited, you're going public, and you go, oh, I've been dealing with them for 2 years, but we just shipped the goods and they just sent me money and we don't have an agreement in place. It's ridiculous. You cannot get any financing of any kind unless you've got the documentation to go along it. And going to see somebody like Larry, he's got to be able to prove it so that his audited results can back up what you're stating. We see it all the time. I can't even tell you how many deals I've looked at that are based on a handshake, and that can't operate anymore. That's the whole reason you're legal.
And I'll just follow up, and you're completely right. And if we can't get the audit done, if you can't get audited, then you're talking about a qualified audit opinion. Securities commissions will not accept a qualified audit opinion. It's a waste of paper. So I said 2 years, preferably 3 years if you can, especially if you're building inventory over that period. You really need that inventory to have been audited and verified by the auditors at the year end. So plan ahead, and best of success.
Yeah, I think if anybody is in this room that's looking to start a cannabis business, I think that what you should take from that is you should start with good financial health from the beginning. Make sure that you have someone who's managing your books appropriately for your future success. So the tech landscape is always growing and evolving. How can technology be used to help cannabis businesses become more profitable? What is your favorite tech and why? We're going to start with Fern.
Thanks, Brianna. Well, there's lots of tech for the space, and I'd say that's a growing area. There's a lot of investment coming in. Initially it was all about the product, and now it's all about the product and ways to sell the product, get to more consumers, advancing the product range as well at the same time. From our standpoint, providing a payment solution, what we've sought to do is integrate our payments platform with all the tech that is powering the space. So whether it's your point of sale solution or a click and collect solution, setting up your website from an e-commerce standpoint, or participating in a marketplace. So what I would say to anyone in the sector is making sure that you are dealing with a provider that can offer you that range of integrations really makes a difference, makes it a lot easier for you to use various types of tech, for example, with our payments platform. As a consumer, I think the marketplaces are a great option, and those are proliferating now and sort of have more reach and have more capability. I also think with COVID, the change to allow for real click and collect solutions and e-commerce and delivery, I think that's really changed the paradigm. So I would encourage, on the retail side, I would encourage retailers to look at those solutions, try and expand their reach, their customer reach.
What about you, Justin? Do you have any favorite tech for the retail part of the cannabis industry?
I'd say Merrco, first and foremost. Outside of Merrco, I think the two that we really see drive impact in our business is one, our analytics provider. So we use Headset quite heavily. And I think oftentimes retailers fall into the trap of just going with aggregated data, right? They'll look at what sells well in the region, what sells well at the provincial level, but then we all just end up selling the same thing. So what we try to do is leverage all the data points that we're able to cultivate through our POS, through our e-commerce as well, through stuff like Headset to really understand what our consumer actually wants and use that to inform our buying decisions. The other piece is our loyalty engine. So we use Alpine IQ. I think especially as some of the governance has become a little looser and the regulations have become looser around loyalty programs, it's an essential part to any retail business. Not only does it drive CLV for us, drive stickiness for our customers, but it also helps us from an inventory management perspective get rid of products, frankly, that we don't necessarily, that have been sitting on our shelves for way too long. So I think, combining those two things, both having an analytics engine and having a loyalty engine, can help us become a little more data-driven in how we do things, and from a cash flow perspective, make things a little easier.
Fantastic. And as we all know, there is a long list of regulatory and reporting requirements to be in the cannabis industry, all that red tape. How would these be factored into a business plan, and how can business owners balance the costs while maximizing profits? I'm going to go with Oscar on this one.
That's outside my field, so
That's okay.
I only help companies raise capital, so it's on the banking side. But I will add one thing. I have about 300 cannabis clients, and there is lots of banks in the United States to take your business. So now they are a needle in a haystack. They're not easy to find, but they are. Most of them are heavily concentrated in Texas and Oklahoma. They're taking clients daily, and they're offering everything from credit card to banking, escrow services, the works. It's so there are some issues, but you can imagine the SEC changed some rules to help cannabis companies raise capital. So, and therefore it had to open up the banking. So the banking in the United States is open.
Yeah, I would just say that because of the federal illegality in the US, accepting credit cards for cannabis is not legal and not compliant. So if they're doing it's not legit. Just
I'm using it every single day, fully compliant with the SEC and the sector.
not for cannabis payments. Maybe if you're using it for people to invest in your clients, that's a different scenario. But for people to go into a dispensary and use a credit card to pay for product, not compliant, not legal.
What about you, Josh? What do you see business owners balancing the cost while maximizing profits?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting question for a couple reasons. I think Canadians by design are very conservative as to what they'll spend money on and what they'll finance and what kind of risk and debt they'll do. The American approach is very interesting because they look at opportunity cost before the actual cost, whereas Canadians don't necessarily take that approach, and they should. So accounts receivable financing, or factoring as it's known, should be used in three areas. The first one being startup, which you could argue every cannabis company in Canada is still a startup. Second would be turnaround, which you could say is a big chunk of cannabis companies already are in turnaround, but also hockey stick growth. So when you sit down and you look at an opportunity and go, okay, well, you know, I've got an invoice out right now for 5,000 units with the OCS, and Alberta's asking me to come up with 2,000 units, but I can't pay for those 2,000 units until I get paid from the 5,000 units on the OCS. You should be calling me, because I can provide you the liquidity on those 5,000 units so that you can go and fill that order at Alberta, you can go fill that order in BC or in Saskatchewan. Because if you're turning down business, that's an opportunity cost that's greater than any financial cost for you to get that business. And I find that a lot of Canadians don't really grasp that. I'm Canadian, so I'm not bashing us, but we look at it like, well, that's too expensive. But the reality is, if you're leaving money on the table and opportunities to grow your business, then you're actually hurting your business. The flip side of that is we've also seen customers that are growing so fast that they could actually go out of business because they can't fill all these orders. So we provide a very, very niche spot to be able to handle all that. And I will say this too, this is really important. A lot of the people in finance in the space are brokers. It's heavily brokered all the way through. We are not brokers. We manage our own fund. We do our own underwriting. We do our own deployment. We have our own documentation, and we work hand in hand. My partner Jerry and I have talked to probably 500 cannabis companies across the country. We've underwritten over 100. We really understand the difficulties that you guys go through, and we're really here to make sure that you guys can stay strong and alive. So that's kind of my pitch on that.
Yeah, it's like the perfect intro to the next question. So,
Can I jump in? Yeah.
Oh yeah, please go ahead.
So you were talking about regulation versus profit, and I would say that the industry needs to focus on both. Regulation is we need to take very seriously, whether it's on the cannabis operations side or it's the security side. The rules are not there to be broken; they're there to be complied with. Really, because the cost of not complying is so severe that it can put us out of business. So we have to look at all of the regulation that we face as a fact of life and find a way to manage within it. Profit. Listen, it's great to hear the industry talking about profit and not just revenue. That's a great development over the last couple of years, and I'm very grateful for that. But we need to find ways to make cannabis companies profitable. They need to be really focused on cost control, really focused on margins, and because without profitability, the industry can't go anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just going to add too, so the regulatory piece is critical because the biggest asset any cannabis company has is their license. So if you're risking your license, you're risking your entire enterprise. But dealing with whether it's accounting or capital providers, retail, like dealing with people in this space that have the knowledge and the know-how that are committed to the sector really makes a big difference. Like I would say from a Merrco standpoint, there are payment providers out there that will come and pitch you and say, we can do your payments for you. They don't understand the space. They don't understand like what's needed in terms of getting your license in place, what you need to show the inspector, what you need to do in terms of integration with the POS and manage your inventory and all those aspects. It really makes a big difference. There's a lot of value to be gained from dealing with people who understand the space.
Yeah, all of you are 100% correct, and just shows again all of the things that we have to persevere in the cannabis industry. So if a business wanted to expand, the most common way to access capital has been to sell equity in their company. What are the other options available for financing, and what are their advantages or disadvantages? I'm going to start with Oscar and then go to Josh next.
Well, first of all, I'm not an advocate of cannabis companies going public, so you'll wonder, I think cannabis companies should spend their time growing their business, becoming profitable. We now have a vehicle. Look, I'm a Canadian, and all my business is in the United States. American cannabis companies that I work with are busy raising $75 million every 12 months from their customers. Their customers are reinvesting, giving away very little equity in their companies, getting their valuations that they want, and fully compliant. This is really important. Fully compliant. The SEC opened it up for US and Canadian companies only. So you got a gift if you're a Canadian company. This is the best gift you'll ever have. And you don't need to rush to go public. You do not need to. If you're trying to get into the TSXV or CSC or OTC, Americans have no appetite for that. None whatsoever. In fact, Gage, which went public, had to be acquired because there was lawsuits ready to occur because Americans don't like pink sheet deals or OTC. They want $5 stock, $20 stock, and they want that on NASDAQ and NYSE. They bought in for the long haul, not the short haul. So I'm the equity debt guy that fully compliant, low equity that you have to give away in your company. And I should also mention, the United States is the only country in the world that allows you to incentivize the investor. That's right. Except for marijuana, you can give away everything to me to incentivize to put more money in the company. So I had a CBD company that gave away their CBD products, depending how much money they invested, 500,000, 1,500. Some of them give away drinks. I have clients who give away beer, vodka, cars, motorcycles. That's right, fully compliant with the SEC's blessing. I don't touch anything that's non-compliant. So